Welcome to the Vet Med Wellness and Leadership Podcast, where we discuss central challenges vet med leaders face, such as burnout, stress, and difficult interactions with clients and staff, just to name a few. In each episode, you will hear about actionable solutions that you can apply to your practice and invitations to connect with fellow leaders who are passionate about improving the wellness of the vet med profession. By subscribing, liking, commenting, or sharing this podcast, you are helping more veterinary professionals find the resources shared in these episodes. Thank you in advance for listening and supporting this show. I hope you enjoy it.
Hey everybody, Crystal Stokes here with Dr. Amanda Ensor. She is a small animal general practitioner and graduated from the University of Tennessee back in 2012. And throughout her experience, she has developed a real passion for mentorship. So after about 10 years in clinical practice, she now serves as a full-time veterinary mentor. So we'll be talking more about that today and her love of mentorship and a new model of mentorship that you may find interesting for your practice. So Dr. Amanda, why don't we start off with, tell me about maybe one of the most interesting or strange pets that you've ever worked on as a veterinarian.
Well, Crystal, first, thank you for having me. It's always great to talk to you. And, I think as we had talked about before, it's always exciting if we get one animal that's just out of our norm. So obviously, I always work with dogs and cats, but I do a lot of dentistry. And where I've worked, I've had the opportunity to work where they've had a lot of wildlife and near aquariums. And I just happened to get to do a dental procedure on a pufferfish. So they, of course, unbeknownst to me, do have kind of beak-like material that really needs to be kind of sanded down in order to not overgrow to impede them eating. So with that, my dental equipment really came in handy because we can't have them under anesthesia for very long. So they do have to do magical chemical stuff in the water in order to anesthetize the fish. And so for that, they're only able to come out of the water briefly in order for us to do something quick and then put them back in or they'll wake up. So for that, I was able to kind of zip the beak while he was asleep briefly and then put him back down and helped him eat a bit. So it was really fun. I definitely had a lot of help because I don't run anesthesia in fish. And so that was intimidating. But with dental equipment, I could pretty much work on anything, which was a joy. That was really fun.
Okay, I'm geeking out. So how do pufferfish in the wild file their beaks?
I mean, that's a great question, too. One that I probably should have looked into more after doing this procedure, because I'm not sure I have a great answer for that. But I do think that they probably have some great natural mechanisms of how they eat that kind of keep that from happening. I'm sure a lot of the issues that they run across is just because they're in captivity and maybe not in their normal habitat to be able to do the things that would, I guess, naturally be able to do that for them.
That's so interesting. Okay, well, I'm imagining this when you had to, the pufferfish was anesthetized and you pull him out or her out. Was it puffed up or was it flat? It was flat. So it was flat and there was a top and a bottom that I had to help take care of. And there was not any pain involved because, again, it's kind of like nail-like material. So it's kind of like filing down a really long nail, but doing it very quickly with dental equipment. But yeah, we had to, it took a little while because in order to do the entire beak, it definitely took a few times to go back down into the water, go back to sleep, and then come back up. So wow, that's so neat. I'm thinking of as a kid, we had hyacinth macaws and we had to, very much keep an eye on their beaks and make sure they were using the things we gave them to keep them filed down. Because about the horrible things that can happen when the beaks are, overgrown or misaligned and it takes that maintenance. It's very interesting, isn't it?
It was. So it was a really fun.
Sharing that with me on that.
No problem. I always will.
So why don't we start off today with running through some of your experience in clinical practice and how this led you into mentorship?
Yeah. So, I graduated in 2012 from UT, and I had known from a young age I wanted to be a veterinarian. And, I think most of us, didn't really know what the reality would look like once you're really out. And I will say in the last 10 years, I've certainly packed quite a bit of experience into those 10 years. When I graduated, I really had aspirations for becoming a veterinary surgeon. My father is actually a retired orthopedic human surgeon. So there was always kind of a love of medicine early on, but humans were not my thing. Animals were. So, but I still really had kind of a love for surgery, and I still do. And so for that, I really wanted to do an internship just because I wasn't ready to close the door on a specialty yet. And I really was looking for mentorship and guidance. And really with that, you're supposed to kind of be guaranteed that as an intern. You're working under doctors. And, with that, it was not quite what I was expecting. Like most, I was expecting long hours, a large caseload. But I ended up in a private practice instead of an academic internship, and it did not have the structure that I think most are hoping to have. So they could really kind of change the rules on what our requirements were at any time, as far as what hours we were working. I was thrown into emergency overnight by myself in a very big city, which was very scary for me. But a learning experience nonetheless. But mentorship was not there. It was not a great work environment at all. It was very toxic and mismanaged. And you could just tell from the second I walked in the door that nobody wanted to be there. And that was not what I was hoping. I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to work hard, and I'm always willing to learn. And I was very excited, and it was not a great environment to thrive. And certainly no one cared about my future. So, even though I had wanted to do a specialty, there were some kind of strange reasons why it didn't happen. I guess, long story short, there was one doctor there that had quite a temper, and he took it out on me pretty bad one day after I tried to just comfort a client who was really upset. And I learned quickly I was not supposed to speak. I was supposed to just do and be quiet. And so after, I guess, that had happened, and that was kind of a rough day, but my supervisor was the one surgeon who worked there. His was the only opinion that mattered as to whether I got a residency or not, and a recommendation. And he wasn't there that day. He just happened to hear about this altercation, and he decided to have a meeting with me where he just basically told me that apparently you're a confrontational person and I can't recommend you for a residency, without ever really knowing me. This was only a few months into where I hadn't even really had much of a rotation with this surgeon yet. So, but that's what the match program is. It happens very quickly into your internship. So after everything I had really worked hard for to make myself a competitive candidate for that, that one conversation was just a dream crusher right there. And for me, I was calmly asking if I could at least just have a conversation because of the weight of what this decision meant as far as my future as a veterinarian. And he didn't want to hear anything of it. So that was that. And by the end of the year, after he finally got to know me and my work ethic, he said he'd be glad to recommend me for a residency. But by then the match was over, and I had made other plans to just go back home to Knoxville and practice. So that was kind of it was a sad reason to not be able to specialize. And it was just a tough year as it was, just because, again, it was just a bad work environment with a lot of egos. And I was really just hoping to take care of patients and clients. And that's really where my heart was. And it didn't seem like many other people felt that way. So it didn't fit for me. But going into general practice, I found it was a little bit better. A lot of times you don't know work environment until you sign a contract and you're into it.
Yeah.
So for that, it was my hometown, and I had really tried to make sure I walked into every clinic possible just to kind of see what fit. And this place wasn't actually looking for a veterinarian that hired me, but they made room for me, and they practiced great medicine. It was in a great area with great clients and had a good reputation as a clinic. And I was just excited. I was so excited to become like a more important member of our community and build relationships with clients and learn and do as much surgery as I could. And it wasn't really a great environment for that either. Some things were good. But again, it was a different type of toxic work environment where one particular vet just did not want to work well with me, no matter how much of a team player attitude I came with and how much I tried to help. I think I don't know if I was seen as a threat or whatnot, but either way, it was something that was very difficult to work with. And I just kept trying and, trying to talk with her and have very difficult conversations about, trying to get on the same page and work well together. And just none of that worked well, as much as I tried. And so I felt like a failure if I did not stick it out here. And I got to become, I was a very unhealthy person at one point when it came to how much stress I was under every single day that, I was very sick. I had really severe gastric ulcers that I was on heavy medications for. I didn't sleep at night. I was propped up every night. And I had panic attacks on the way to work, and I'd have to breathe in a paper bag. And it was just one of those, every day was really tough. And I think what really showed me that I was burning out bad was when I saw that I wasn't being as thorough with my patients, and I wasn't able to smile anymore. I would just randomly cry, which is the opposite of me. I'm like the smiliest, bubbliest person. And so to see, my ability to practice suffer, I really just knew I had to do something. So I had to leave that practice. I knew it was very clear after 6 years, I couldn't make it a better situation no matter what we did. Mm-hmm. And so, that was a tough point. But leaving that and going into relief work was a relief. And it was wonderful to be able to see different practices, and that they're not all like that. There are people who really love their job and love their coworkers, so just at least appreciate them and work well together and focus more on patient care, which is always where my heart was. So I didn't start out. It started out very rocky for me, and I wish I would have had mentorship. And, along those 10 years and even in those early times, I always had students with me. And those were my happier days because they were also bright-eyed and bushy-tailed like I felt. And I learned so much just from helping guide them that's where that whole mentorship really ignited was, early on that way.
Your story it's so compelling and I think so relatable. I think so many people that are listening are going to nod their heads saying, I relate to some part of this story. One of the phrases that keeps running through my mind, and it's a phrase I use a lot in my practice, is I'm here to put the passion back in the people. The passion gets beaten out. And so many people that come into vet med come into it because they are ridiculously passionate about animals and the welfare of animals. And to see, like you said, it took a long time. A lot of discouraging things had to happen to get you to the point where you started to feel your passion fade, where you weren't lighting up anymore. You weren't smiling anymore. You didn't feel like showing up fully. And that's a huge red flag. And that's why people leave the profession. They say, I can't do it anymore. I'm tapping out. And they have a story that they couldn't cut it. And in reality, that's not the truth at all. The truth is that we need to have the wherewithal to know when to cut bait and to go and look for the next thing and to seek out the mentorship and the community that aligns with what you want to do and how you want to practice. And I got to plug somebody real quick because you mentioned relief work.
Yes.
I loved how earlier in your story you mentioned that oftentimes, and this is with any profession, you don't know what this company environment is going to be like until you're already hired. You signed on the dotted line, you're committed. And then you find out all the things, right?
Exactly.
Well, Relief Rover, ta-da, I'm plugging Relief Rover. Relief Rover, they exist for people who do relief work or would just like to maybe dabble in it a bit, or for people that are looking to hire relief workers, and that can be technicians or veterinarians. And part of why she created this is because she herself was a relief worker, and she said there was no platform out there to really be a matchmaker, like a dating service across the country.
That's very true.
It didn't exist. And what she loves about her platform is that it really does allow you to sort of do the dating process so you can work for a place for a few weeks and decide, is this maybe your forever home? Some people fall in love with the place they work for as a relief position, end up staying. And what a beautiful story that is. And so I just wanted to put that in there, that could be something to consider. And I don't want to take us off the rails because you're basically coming to the arc of your story. It reminds me of the hero's journey, which is you go through the dark night. You had extreme burnout. You were losing your drive and your passion for this, for the love that you've had since you were a kid. And you made a big change. And this very much informed the journey that just took you to where you are now and working fully as a mentor for other veterinary professionals. So let's keep going with your story.
Yeah. So, as I go into relief work, I didn't have Relief Rover or any kind of platform to help me. So it was absolutely terrifying. But it wasn't as terrifying as signing up for a different hospital that could have the same toxic issue. Because at that point, that was all I knew was toxicity. And so, as scary as it was to navigate taxes and who even needs a relief vet, how do I even find you? That was a very scary thing. Will I find enough work? Which is a big joke because there's always more than enough work. Everyone needs somebody right now, especially right now. So going into that was just terrifying on its own. But I found a few people, including a colleague of mine, that actually ended up driving an hour and a half to her clinic one way and back. So it was 3 hours round trip to get to her place to work at her hospital for the day, which sounds like an insane amount of travel. I did that 3 or 4 days a week sometimes just because she was available. I knew her while I was trying to navigate relief work, but it was still 10 times better than going 10 minutes down the road to somewhere terrible. So with that, I was able to find good work. And you're right. I also found a place I completely fell in love with. And in the last few years, I had been more regular at those places because of just wonderful people, great medicine. And I found a place where I fit. It's very much like a dating service. And so with that, I'm glad that I was able to find kind of some vet families that I always wanted. But on the side, there were some other cool things I got to be a part of. In all of the bad relationships that I could not fix or make better in my previous work relationships, a friend of mine and I started a mentoring organization for women in our community. And it crossed all different career types to where we would match these women with a mentor in their whatever career they were in, or even just that had a skill set that they wanted to gain, like public speaking or something like that. And it was an incredible experience that with the pandemic, that kind of fizzled the ability to meet and everything like that. But we kept that going for a while. And we had so many women make incredible relationships. They had promotions, career changes, you name it. It was just a great thing to witness. And something I needed to see is that there were other people that wanted to help others. And I wanted to not feel alone in that. And, I guess that segues right into what I'm doing now, which I just came across an ad, I think it was on LinkedIn, and it was for NVA, which is National Veterinary Associates, and they were hiring general practice mentors. And I was like, well, that's interesting. What is that all about? So I looked into it. I interviewed for it because I love mentorship and I believe in it so much. And I also love veterinary medicine. And this was just like the perfect combo to where I had to absolutely go all in and try. And they hired me, which actually out of the 12 mentors they hired across the country to be able to kind of provide a mentor to any new or recent grad hired at an NVA hospital for the first 11 months. And this group of mentors, I feel so honored to be a part of. There are so many achievements and accolades, and there's such kind, wonderful veterinarians that I had always dreamed to work with. That's the team I get to work with now. We meet every week. And what's so unique about this program is that it's a hybrid mentorship program. So there's a good portion of it where I'm traveling all the time. So I have one of the larger territories out of all the mentors. So I go to 6 different states, helping new grads at different hospitals. Some have 4 new doctors and some have 1. But I'll spend maybe a day with them a quarter. So 4 times out of the program or more if I can get to them, where normally it's a surgery day because that's normally the more intimidating thing. So we'll do surgeries together. We can kind of try different techniques together. And I've watched some do some procedures they would have never touched if they were alone. And then not only have they done them with me, but they've mastered them and done them more since I've met with them, which has been a huge thrill. Like a cystotomy. There's one incredible doctor I worked with who wasn't going to take on this case, but she knew that I was going to come mentor that day. So she's like, okay, let's do these together. And then she did it. I really tried to do as little as possible because I knew that she had this handled. And she did a fantastic job. And she's since done another one. And they've been so successful. I'm just so proud. So there's been some great things with the on-site part. And then we do a lot of remote work too. So, we've done 1 hour a month. We'll do a medical lecture. So it's very similar to either a CE lecture, which sometimes it does count for, or they're all run by specialists when they're in regards to things that we expect them to see. So, diabetes, anxiety, as far as the patients that we're seeing and how best to help be able to see them safely and things like that. A lot of behavior ones, but they've all been very tangible to what we expect them to see. And then a really cool part is we're doing whole person meetings as well. So they also are technically 1 hour a month, and it's helping them with student loan debt and boundaries and perfectionism, a lot of things that arguably I would say that most of these new and recent grads don't know the value of yet because they haven't hit burnout yet.
Yeah.
They're just starting. And so knowing why it's so important to take care of yourself first, I don't think that's probably going to till later, but maybe they'll hear some of what we're throwing at them so that they don't hit burnout the way most of us have, or, get themselves in difficult situations that they can't find a way out of. This will provide a great resource for them this first year. And then lastly, a really cool thing about it is that we do case reviews. So every 2 weeks, we break them into smaller groups of each other, and they present a case. And so I'm not really there to critique them per se, but they're just supposed to gain confidence speaking about it, share cool cases with their colleagues that have just graduated as well, what they're seeing, what they're doing. They're learning so much from each other, asking each other questions. And then all I ask them really is like, did you get one big takeaway from this case? And maybe what would you have done differently if maybe the owner could have afforded another test, or any thoughts you have? But it's just incredible to watch them learn. I've watched so many of them really dive deep into this program, and I know that they're already getting so much out of it. And for me, it's just been a thrill.
Oh, I love this story because you think back about how much you would have loved to have had something like this. And so often, some of the best things have ever been built were built on pain. Saying, I don't want anybody to ever have to go through what I went through. So let's reinvent the wheel and do something different. And it's so awesome. You get to be a part of this mentorship program that really intercedes with the look at the path of a veterinarian. But that first year, 2, 3, 4 years, coming out of vet school can be extremely challenging. The confidence is low, perfectionism is high, anxiety is through the roof. You're worried about, what do the doctors above me think? What does the owner think? What does the pet parent think? Am I doing it right? Am I failing? There's just a lot of pressure there. And to be able to have a mentorship program, they can start speaking to these things that sometimes we don't know how to name. I remember when I was a youngster, like in undergrad and grad school, I didn't even know what anxiety was. I would just say, I'm stressed. But looking back on it, I'm like, no, as a psychotherapist, I had anxiety, but I didn't know what it was back then. So, having these programs that really give language to things like perfectionism or, how to manage your finances. Like you come out with a lot of student debt from vet school. How to speak in a professional way and feel confident about your cases and case conceptualization and how you show up as a professional and how you would speak to your peers or the pet parent. So all this is just, it sounds so fabulous. And the hybrid approach too, very appealing how you all made it partially online so you can work with people all over and they can meet each other across hospitals. Then you also fly there and in person, make that in-person touch. You can oversee surgeries and kind of be by their side and giving them that extra confidence to learn these skills in the moment. It sounds like a really fun program.
It's been great. And I think something about us being unbiased help as well. So I know that, whenever I did work somewhere and I really wanted to ask another doctor a question, you have to really make sure it's something that was worthy of stopping an already busy doctor. And so most of the time questions go unasked because of that, because your coworkers that could be around are too busy, or you may just kind of feel stupid and because they're your colleagues and coworkers you see every day versus someone who's just, I'm always like, ask me. Anytime I try and be as on call for all of these doctors as I possibly can. And so some of them are having cases late into the night and they're alone and they don't know what to do and they don't have anyone to ask. And some, the doctors they have around are just too busy and they really just need to have just a couple of things answered to make sure they're in the right direction. And I know it's kind of a balancing act of wanting to make sure I'm not there for them too much because you do have to gain confidence and know that, you can make the right decision without me. And I always try and reiterate that I know you don't necessarily need me, but hopefully you can find ways to make me useful. But yeah, because I don't want to give them every answer. I definitely want to give them guidance of how they can find it. One thing that I didn't have as far as no present mentor for me, I used resources so much. So I think that's something my mentorship team has also gathered, all of the wonderful resources that we've used throughout the years that we know are accurate, they're up to date, because there's so many times where, I think every vet looks up something every day. I always will, because things are always changing, and there's just great places they can go in 2 seconds when they need to have something answered. And so I hope give them guidance that way too. But it's just sometimes easier for them because I'm not in the hospital, so they don't have to feel like they're ever really bothering me. Yeah. So what I've learned is that it kind of takes one visit at least for me to spend the full day with them, and then they really just understand that I really am there for you. We have a better relationship built in the foundation then. And once that happens, then the floodgates open as far as like, okay, well, now that we know each other well, what do you think about this x-ray or something like that? But it's been really cool.
Yeah. And I appreciate how your mentorship style is one that promotes agency. You don't want them to be dependent on you. You want to say, hey, I'm here for you in a supportive fashion, but you can do it. You're building their confidence and helping them develop that capacity of really standing on their own 2 feet. And knowing how to access resources, knowing when to seek mentorship or support from other people. I think it sounds like a very well-rounded program. I did a talk not that long ago on perfection for baby docs, as we like to call them. And when I do my presentations, what I build into it is there's like an educational piece first. So when you have languaging, understanding what perfection is, understanding the antidote to perfectionism and how that might look. And then I want you to develop an action plan. How might you, in a very personalized way, look at the resources you currently have, what you've learned from this talk today, the team that you have, and the difficulties you're dealing with? Set yourself a goal for the next week or 2, and then we'll check back in and say, how did that action plan go? What barriers did you encounter? And what's your next step? And so just to make this progressive, and doing it in a group fashion is really fun. It kind of sounds like how you all do your case conceptualization. Do that for ourselves to say, the case for me around perfectionism is I really struggle with this part of it. And so in order to deal with that, here's the challenge I'm going to assign for myself for the next week. It's really fun. And I got to ask you this. Remember in the beginning of this podcast, you mentioned how you come from a family of medicine, but you chose not to go the people route. You're like, no, I'm doing animals. And here you are now working with people. What do you make of that?
Yeah. Well, I think the medicine side of people was not my thing, but you're right. Like I really did not understand how much of a people business the veterinary world really is. And I think, a lot of times we try and manifest things that we were not given. And I think I hopefully am a true testament for that, because I was not given mentorship. If anything, I don't want to make it sound sad, but it just seemed like it was a very abusive start to my career. That didn't have to be. I didn't have to learn by being thrown in the fire. I don't think that my patients were served well that way. And, I even came to a point where when I wasn't doing well where I was, I voiced it to people. I was not quiet about it. I told my colleagues, coworkers that I was not okay. And there wasn't a shred of concern from anyone. And I just remember feeling so alone and how awful that feels. And so I think for me, I'm always just really compassionate in a way that I don't want others to feel what I felt, go through what I went through, if they don't have to, because you can lead through kindness. It does not have to be something that you have to be belittled in order to learn. And I know that that's how many internships are. That's how many professors can be. Luckily, where I went to school, it was not that way, and it was great. So I think that's why I was so confused coming out, that I had so many great veterinarians to learn from when I was in school. And then when I went into the real world, it was not that way. And so it doesn't have to be that way. And I like showing other doctors that, if nothing else, help each other, be there for each other. Don't be above asking for help or advice or providing it when you have time, because at the end of the day, it serves your patient and your client so much more by having another pair of eyes on your x-ray or someone else just to look at your blood work too. I don't care how long I've been out, how many CE hours I accumulate, there will always be value in what my colleagues know. And so I think that message matters so much to me that, I think I got into the people business somehow.
Yes.
I didn't mean to.
At the end of the day, I really feel that people that work in veterinary medicine are deeply empathic and they are driven to relieve suffering, right?
Yeah.
Working with animals, that initial draw is to help animals thrive, help them to not be in pain, help them to feel better. And at the end of the day, we're all just one like a species on the planet. And so when you can see another, a fellow human that's really struggling and suffering, and you may be able to empathize either because you've been through it, or you can just imagine what it would be like. There's just that natural instinct, I think, is inherent in people that are drawn to veterinary medicine to relieve that if they know how to. It's
empathy can be a dangerous thing sometimes.
Say it again.
That empathy can be a dangerous thing sometimes because of how much we go down the rabbit hole of that empathy and living those emotions with your clients and always feeling less than every day. I know that I think those are a few things I really try and instill in all these mentees that we call them. And, knowing that as much advice as you can get, I'm very lucky to work in some hospitals with these doctors that already have mentors. And with that, I think it's been great that they have other people that they can ask questions. There's some that actually have great mentorship programs already on site. So it's been a fine line to try and walk, not stepping on anybody's toes, and also not telling them to do things that are otherwise not part of that hospital norm. I'm always trying to adapt to what they have and go as gold standard with what we've got here. But I guess, long story short, it's something that they all could use someone to say, you did a great job. Like just hearing another veterinarian say that to me, I've had one or two, 3 or 4, mentors throughout my, clinical years too, that I hold very dear. And sometimes that was all I needed to hear was that you did a really great job on that case, because a client can say that and it's sweet. A receptionist can say that and it's kind. But when another colleague that's on your level acknowledges that, then it means so much. And I just watch their eyes light up. And it means a lot to genuinely say that to another vet, because I know how it felt for me.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It's the circle. Caring, sharing, and caring all goes together. I very much appreciate you sharing the hybrid model that you all have developed. And for those out there listening today, regardless of what situation you're in, whether it's a small practice or maybe you're a student, practice manager, wherever you are, if you're noticing, you're looking at your situation, you're thinking, gosh, I think that we could benefit from some kind of mentorship within our hospital. Start thinking about ways to make that happen, and know that there are many different models and ways to get started. But at the end of the day, we know that the evidence is abundant that isolation is toxic. Going it alone is not helpful. So in whatever capacity, whether it's saying we're going to have a little pop-up within our hospital and we're going to just start with the technicians, go for it. If you're a student listening and you want to grab some of their students together and listen to this podcast and talk about what you may ask for and make some requests, do it. And of course, we have, Dr. Amanda here, and she has said that she is willing to be in touch with those of you who may have questions about mentorship or want to know more about their program specifically. So how about you tell us a little more about the best way to get in touch with you, or if there's anything else you would like to say just to bring this podcast today to a close?
Absolutely. So for me, my love of mentorship goes beyond what I get paid to do. And I definitely have gone to coffee with people who want to go to vet school, who are a vet student, who are just coming out and just want to know what options they have or discuss anything that's been hard on them that they want to go through. So somehow word has gotten out about me about that. And I will be happy to do that, even if it's via Zoom. So for me, I'm always happy to share my email, which is amanda.ensor, ENSOR, @nva.com. So anyone can feel free to email me if they have questions about mentorship, if they just want someone to be in their corner, I'll be there. And there's other great resources too. So there's another fantastic Tennessee grad who came up with MentorVet. And I'm pretty sure they're a very great, popular remote mentoring organization as well that I've heard her speak on a CE talk on burnout, and she's fantastic. And that's another wonderful resource for others that's just independent of NVA. But I think in general, that's kind of the goal for what NVA has in store, is that they've really turned around to invest in the hospitals that they have, into the doctors that they hire. And this really is a program that genuinely is there for the new grad to gain confidence faster, feel supported, no matter what. And there's no question too small for us. And so that's something that they're hoping to be able to make sure that every new or recent grad that's been hired at an NVA hospital next year will have one of us. So, but in the meantime, you have my email and feel free to reach out.
I love it. So I will make sure I put that in the show notes. So those of you listening today, don't worry about trying to remember it. It'll all be in the show notes. And Dr. Amanda, I really appreciate you being on today. Your enthusiasm is totally contagious. I appreciate your generosity and being willing to speak with people outside of the scope of NVA. And just to say to everybody listening, if you're thinking about reaching out, just do it. Okay. We are all in this together. The more of a community we can develop that's pulling in the same direction, that's working on supporting people, doing what they love, feeling healthy and well while they're doing it. That's why we're here. That's how these conversations start. And I know that Amanda has a wealth of resources too that you may not even know exist. So this would be helpful to you even beyond the conversation. So I really encourage you all to reach out. And Dr. Amanda, I just thank you so much for being on today. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great to talk to you again, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you feel stoked after listening to this episode. And as always, I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Is there a topic that you want to know more about? Please let me know. And thank you again for subscribing and sharing your favorite episodes with others. It really means a lot.